Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Magic gameplay. This time around we are once again playing as the Dwarves against the Greenskins on the map here at Ridge. And quite frankly, this is, I think, the second time I've ever been on this map. This map that doesn't seem to come up in all the hundreds of games I've done in multiplayer. This is probably my second game ever on this map. So, I actually was looking at it, I'm like, I don't remember this map, and I wasn't really sure what the terrain was. I didn't remember the terrain off the top of my head, so regardless, I went with my Ironbreaker comp, and I've been having some great success with this. I've been having a lot of fun with this build, because making use of an elite infantry unit that you don't normally make use of, I think is a lot of fun. So, I've honed this build quite a little bit, I think, against the Greenskins. Still running the Rune Lord. I think that he's good for this build because he does give you the Locus of Power, which I think if your opponent brings Azag, as my opponent did here, having extra 15% magic resistance is huge. It means that all your Dwarf Warriors have an additional 25, have a built-in 40% magic resist, and your Rune Lord, as you saw when I glossed over there, 55% magic resist, so he's very resistant. Alongside that, of course, Rune of Wrath and Rune of Negation, and then the Rune of Master Rune of Grungni. So, giving you extra missile resist, it might seem a little silly against the Dwarves or against the Greenskins, but the Greenskins do have quite a bit of shooting. Oftentimes you'll see a Goblin firing line. In this case, you're actually seeing some not Goblobbers, some Hammer, of course, some Goblin Rock Lobbers, and so the Greenskins definitely have some nasty options they can bring out against you, and being able to negate that missile pressure is very useful, I think. For my front line, it is a mix of single unit of Norgrimling's Ironbreakers, so the Elite Regiment of Renowned. Their main perk is that there's a lot more of them. There's 90 of them instead of 75. Otherwise, they've got better stats because they are triple veterancy. Though actually, their melee defense, I do believe, is not as good as a triple veteran normal Ironbreaker. But honestly, they're still really good and very cheap for what they do. So we have a unit of them anchoring the line, 2 units of Ironbreakers out on the flanks, which gives me a very elite core. And these guys will trash any chaff infantry the Orcs bring, and they will tie down Black Orcs for a really long amount of time. And if my opponent decides to bring Black Orcs, we've got a few counters in the back. So 2 units of miners with blasting charges on either flank. These guys, of course, nothing special, nothing too great in melee. I do believe they actually lose to Goblin Spears in a straight-up fight. But they do have armor piercing, so they can do disproportionate amounts of damage to units with armor, like chariots, like Broken Tusk Mob, in the odd chance you'd see one. But Black Orcs, which don't have the greatest melee defense. These guys, while they obviously will not win, they won't come close to winning, they will dish out a disproportionate amount of hurt. They also do have those blasting charges to beat up on squishy mobs. And they give me some extra width and some extra zoning power. For the rest of my army, we do have the Dragonback Slayers anchoring things in the center, 2 units of Bugman's Rangers on either flank to help pressure away enemy missiles, to help chip away at squishy infantry, and honestly, even if push comes to shove, they can shoot down some Black Orcs. And also to defend my normal Rangers, my Rangers weapons and the Ulthar's Raiders, who don't have immunity to psychology, they don't have regen, but I need them for their armor piercing damage. They've got great ranged missile damage, not good ammo, only 8 ammo capacity, but if my opponent brings Black Orcs, these are my hard counter to Black Orcs, they will snipe them down. Finally, we do have the Goblobber to demoralize enemy troops and to provide some counter battery fire against enemy artillery, because I figured, my opponent might decide to bring some Goblin Rock Lobbers, and in that case, I need to get rid of them somehow. And, go figure, my opponent did bring the Hammer of Gork, and you can see it here in all its goblin-y glory, being pushed forward. Triple veteran Goblin Rock Lobber with a blind effect, so potentially pretty nasty. Definitely a bit of a nuisance. For the rest of my opponent's build, he went very wide with a very goblin-y build. I've been seeing more and more of these. The Mogreb's Mangy Marauders over here. The AP Cloonies, I do believe. I'm not entirely sure why In replays, they only show as night goblins with purple night goblins with chevrons, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. These are the AP Cloonies, though. You can see there's a little the spin to win ability there, and the unbreakable. So definitely some solid choices. 3 units of nasty skulkers to prison shank my troops. The rusty arrows to provide some range support. And then 2 boar chariots, so armor piercing, decent armor. These guys can definitely pile through my front line and do some nasty work, especially as I don't have too many snares. Normally with normal dwarf builds, you'll see runesmiths, multiple runesmiths, or thanes with tormentor swords, so you'll have more snares. But here I only have 2 snares, Dragonback Slayers and the Rune Lord. My opponent also does have a unit of trolls over here, some extra armor piercing, a Goblin Big Boss, as well as some Savage Orcs camping out in the woods. More Goblin Archers, more Savage Orcs over here. Interesting choice to Savage Orcs, though. These guys can do some decent work against lower end Dwarves and a Squig Herd out on the flank. Finally, he does have Azag up in the air, who is toting the Fate of Buna, Spirit Leech, Soul Blight, so the usual armor debuffs and stuff. Scroll of Power, which gives him extra better ability recharges, means he can drop his spells a little faster. Foe Seeker, and then Wah, which of course lets him buff his troops. Interestingly enough, my opponent brought Get On with it, which I think is one of the most useless abilities in the game. 8% charge bonus and a 40-meter effect on a lord that you usually have on a mount with a faction that usually is doesn't have any units that synergize with his mount. Bit of a waste in my opinion. I really don't like that ability. I think it's pretty cheap, though I might be wrong, but I really don't think it's all that good. Regardless, you can see my opponent is immediately, you can see, well, first of all, his Rock Clobbers firing on my 4 Iron Breakers, but then he does hit my Norgliming's Iron Breakers here with the Fate of Buna, and we will watch and see how much damage it does. You can see it's already about halfway through. You can see the Goblobber teeing off on the Hammer of Gork, so a bit of a Regiment of Renown fight. But in comparison to what you'll usually see out of Fate of Buna, which would probably normally take off another, say, 1100 HP here, well, they got shipped down by about 2,000 HP, but that still leaves them rather healthy. In the meantime, you can see the Rock Clobbers here, the Goblobber just trashing the crew, with these poor goblins being left spattered on the ground and being ground down into paste. And they are trying to counter battery here, fire some of their own nasty sludge or whatever it is they shoot. They are getting completely smushed here by the artillery. My opponent actually has them drop the gun, and they are going to flee. In the meantime, Azag kind of floating around in the air, being a bit of a nuisance, being a pain in the rear. My opponent is trying to flank and circle around with the Mogur's Mangy Marauders, but that is not going to go well for them at all, as the Bugman's Rangers have spotted them, and they are going to snipe them down. And you can see all these poor puppies lying here in the dust, in the snow, I guess, as they are getting torn to shreds by the focused fire from the Bugman's Rangers. And Goblin Wolf Riders have terrible HP per model. Not only is it not cavalry levels where it's like 100 HP, give or take, these guys don't even have, I think, infantry levels of HP per model. So they're very, very squishy. They tend to fall apart to range fire very easily. My opponent's trying to get a little cheeky here with Azag, feigning some attacks, but does decide to pull away before the Dragonbacks can engage. In the meantime, on the flanks, he is circling around, and I finally spotted this kind of maneuver. I started pushing out because I figured, you know, if he's going to camp, we'll push out. That's fine. This is a fairly pushy build. I just didn't want to commit too soon. But now, seeing that he's decided to flank, I do decide to reposition and set up a flank defense over here. My opponent, in the meantime, is pulling out the Squig Herd, and as I was distracted over here and trying to save my artillery piece, which unfortunately overextended due to some bad micro on my part, Azag does dive down. He's going to cause some pressure. Now, the problem, of course, is that all of my missiles are very slow. Have very slow missile speed, so they aren't really able to keep up with Azag. He kind of just flies away, and I can't really do much about that. But the Goblobber was interrupted there. I'm going to try to pull it through here. The Squig Herd jumps on the Miners, and they're going to tear through them very quickly. Miners don't have good melee defense, and the Squigs do a lot of hurt. The Squigs are a nasty unit, but I do start firing back at them. You can see some blasting charges going out from the Miners, and the Squigs are taking quite a bit of a beating from the Archers because they don't have very good, or they have only okay armor at 50. They lose a Squig somewhere. He's probably dies somewhere in there, and you can see some Squigs dropping here and there. But you know, we do get them to rampage, and that is really what I was hoping for with all that missile pressure, is that these guys would rampage and go out of control, and then I could kind of massacre them here in the pits amongst my troops. My opponent does try to shut me down here, throwing the Mogur's Mangy Marauders in against the Bugman's Rangers. Not a good move, at least not for the Mogur's Mangy Marauders. Now, it might make sense for my opponent trying to tie down the Bugman's Rangers. That makes total sense, but the Mangy Marauders have terrible melee stats, and the Bugman's Rangers are absolute champs, and they are going to take these guys down hard, and I don't even know if they'll lose a model. You can see they're doing really well. They were on 58 models going in. Over here, Azag does dive in on the Bugman's Rangers. Does quite a bit of work, but the Bugman's Rangers are immune to psychology, so they will dive in to interfere. I did see my opponent's flanking maneuver, so I know I can't pull these troops offline. These Norgliming's Iron Breakers still zoning in the front, and I really need to get this artillery piece back in the safety here. So, really, the only unit I have that could counter is Azag, is the Dragonback Slayers, and they're over here clearing out Squig Herd, so not a good position, but we do start turning around the Rangers, the weapons. We are going to go after Azag, and you can see he's actually getting beaten down pretty bad here by the Bugman's boys, who really are not taking any nonsense from Azag with his terrible melee defense. So he's trying to get away. You can see I have popped some buffs. I do believe my buff just wore off with the Rune Lord. So you can see I'm trying to show what was going on there. If there was something that's not being shown here. But either way, the Mogul's Ranging Marauders get routed off, having killed one Bugman's Ranger in exchange for about 20 models. So not a good trade at all. The Squig Herd gets routed off, losing 10 models and most of their troops. My opponent does charge in here with the Boars, riding through the crews, but this is, once again, this is a problem with using chariots against artillery pieces. You might get some kills on the crew, but you tend to get snared on the artillery, on the pieces themselves. So in the meantime, though, my opponent is being very sneaky. You can see I do hit these Orc Boar chariots with the Mark by Ulthar. They are trying to pull away. I do pop the Master Rune of Negation here with the Rune Lord to keep my troops alive, and the crews, I'm getting them back on the guns as fast as I can to pull away, and I do hit these guys with the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin. It's not going to do a lot of damage, but that 48% slow is going to do huge work at keeping these guys pinned in place. You can see one of the board chariots goes down there, and they are not able to escape. In the meantime, the Hammer of Gork is coming back online, and is going to start pecking away at my Armbreakers, who are doing their very best here in the pits to hold. Satchel Chargers going out of the miners to tear up these nasty Skulkers before they can do too much hurt. Bugman's Rangers have finally zoned away Asak, and you can see how much of a beating he took from just a few crossbow volleys. He doesn't have the greatest armor at only 70. He does hit me again with the Fate of Yuna. Maybe not a bad choice, I don't know, but it's not going to be able to pick off models still. Fate of Yuna just does HP damage. So you can see Satchel Chargers flying in. They're going to bypass the Iron Breakers. They're going to plow into these nasty Skulkers and do some nasty work, just annihilating those poor Gobos in a flurry of heavy Satchel Charge fire. The Goblobber, rather than focusing on the artillery piece here, is going to start chipping away at the Rusty Arrows, who are a threat. The Miners holding their own against the Night Goblins as well as Azak. And in the meantime, the Bugman's Rangers chipping away. And you can see I'm holding the line here because I know that my opponent has Hammer of Gork hidden there. I know he has these chariots there, and I need to be ready to counteract those and stop them. But in the meantime, my opponent is flanking around with another unit of chariots. He's getting these trolls waiting on the flank. So really, it's some rough stuff. These Rusty Arrows do get zoned away finally. They get scared off. And my opponent does use Wah here with Azak. He's going to dive in against the, or he wanted to dive in against the Miners, but decides to feint and goes after my backline. But now the Dragonback Slayers are here, so if he decides to dive in, it's going to be very risky. But unfortunately, he really needs to deal with my backline because he's applying so much pressure to his troops. He does dive in. You can see Azak's down to like 1100 HP before he manages to land. He does land among the Bugman's Rangers, gets a kill in there. The Mogur's Ranging Marauders trying to do some damage, but these guys are immune to psychology. They don't care. They don't give a darn. They're going to get in there. They're going to start beating the snot out of Azak with his terrible melee defense, and now the Slayers are in there, but Azak does manage to get away with before the Slayers land a hit, so he doesn't get slowed, and he's going to be able to eke his way out. Now my opponent is a Rocklobber over there being a nuisance, but I am able to start turning the Goblobber around to counter battery. In the meantime, the Savage Orcs, though, are starting to break cover, and they're going to start advancing. Bit of a miss micro, I think, on my opponent's part, not really keeping his troops together. You can see the Iron Breakers are getting absolutely pounded by the Orc Boars. But once again, the Orc Boar Chariot's getting focus fired by the throwing axes. You can see all those hatches just flying in against these Orcs, hitting those poor little boars. Look at that poor piggy just getting clocked. And these guys are getting absolutely shredded, and you can see, despite their courage, they're charging into these Slayers. They're charging into a blob with Slayers, and so it's going to be rough for them. They're going to start getting slowed. They only have 39 speed, which at this point means they can't outrun Dragonback Slayers, and they're going to get slaughtered in the pits. This other unit of Boars does get caught by the throwing weapons and the Norman's Iron Breakers, and once again, they will not be long for this world. They get snared. You can see they're getting chipped away down to one model, 217 HP. They have terrible melee defense, and they go down, so probably some nasty friendly fire from the Norman's Iron Breakers, but you know what? It's okay. Unfortunately, I make a bit of a mistake here. The Rune Lord gets caught by the nasty Skulkers, while the Iron Breakers here were kind of sitting around doing nothing. They get some Satchel Charges into these nasty Skulkers, though. You can see just how much damage those Satchel Charges are doing. They're up to 137 kills, but the Trolls dive in, tying me down. And in the meantime, the Rune Lord here is struggling mightily against the Goblin Big Boss, who uses Potion of Foolhardiness. He's really laying the smack down this guy. I was really surprised. The Big Boss is mounted on a Spider, but his stats are not that good, and he doesn't have much armor piercing. So I figured, the Rune Lord could hold, but he's not holding very well at all. He's getting kind of trashed. Regardless, the Miners, though, holding their own. I'm being forced to use my Ulthar's Raiders here against the Trolls, which is not ideal. You don't want to be wasting armor piercing on Trolls, but honestly, there's not much armor left on the field, so whatever. So the Trolls getting peppered down. The Iron Breakers, of course, aren't going to break to a little bit of fear and terror, and some interference from Azak. They really don't care. These Trolls are having a terrible time of it. They're getting peppered by hatchets all the way. The Rangers with throwing axes have immense rate of fire. They throw incredibly fast, and so these Trolls are just getting slaughtered as they try to pull out. And really some rough stuff for my opponent here. The Miners, of course, doing their best to hold. But my opponent is getting the nasty Skulkers, or the Night Goblins here, the AP Clooney's pushing in, being a nuisance. You can see the Goblobber still chipping away, despite the the Hammer of Gork still chipping away, as the Goblobber is trying its best to force the screw off. In the meantime, I finally did manage to shadow the Squig Herd, shadow this Boar Chariot, and shadow the Morgrim's Mangy Marauders with the Slayers and Bugman's Rangers, and we're going to pull those guys out now to fight. And you can see Azag here, so messed up. He's sitting on 574 HP, and he does pull away, though, managing to escape because my Ironbreakers really need to save my Rune Lord there, who's been hit by a Spirit Leech. But, of course, with 40% magic resist, he's gonna hold out pretty well. Nasty Skulkers are not going to do well against Ironbreakers at all. They're getting slaughtered here pretty bad. And the Ironbreakers just pour in, and we can watch some intense Dawi action. I love the look of the Ironbreakers. They've got such awesome armor. They look amazing. That plate mail, that chain mail, the cool helmets. I absolutely love it. But either way, they're going to slaughter some nasty Skulkers here in the pits. In the meantime, on the flanks, you can see the satchel charges pouring into the Savage Orcs. Did rout this blob of Orcs. My opponent was definitely had a bit of a kind of slow. He was kind of feeding troops in one at a time, which I think was a little bit of a mistake. I don't think he did that intentionally, but it did mean that he suffered pretty badly. You can see the Hammer of Gore coming online once again, and now the Godlobber is out of ammo, so it can't interfere. But Azag gets really beat up. Over here, the Night Goblins do manage to rout off my Rangers with great weapons. But Mugman's Rangers will stick around. Both units of them. The Slayers are in there. They'll slaughter these guys eventually. It's just going to take a very long time. And you can see these guys have had a very successful game. 156 kills on these guys, so some impressive stuff. Raking in the kills. Definitely getting massive value, even though it was just against miners for most part. You know, they slaughtered some Rangers with great weapons. They did some major work, so props to the AP Cloonies here. Over here, the Godlobber is finally coming, or the Hammer of Gork is finally coming back online. But at this point, I still have a unit of Ironbreakers here on 31 models. The Norgrim's Ironbreakers on 81, though very low on HP. Ironbreakers over here on 71 models, and things are looking rather rough for my opponent. With between a single very healthy unit of Ironbreakers at this point is all I really need. Most of my opponent's army is really badly mauled. You can see Azag over here crying in a corner because he's very low on HP. He's probably out of Winds of Magic and really can't do very much at this point. The Nasty Skulkers here routed. Trolls on 7 models. My Miner's routed over there, but honestly, at this point, my opponent's army is largely dead. But what he's trying to do here is still goon out my Rune Lord, which could potentially stabilize things a little bit. You can see some of the spinning loons there with their chained up dwarves flying around, but the Rune Lord holding his own. At least for a little bit. He's kind of clocking this guy, but he does have the sort of anti-heroes, which I didn't notice before. But I'm starting to pepper him down with some arrow fire, trying to zone him away, trying to get him off my Rune Lord, because he's such a pest. And the Rune Lord does manage to escape there, fleeing through his Bugman's Rangers, and the Bugman's Rangers will tie down the Goblin Big Boss, defending their Liege Lord there, their Liege, diving in against him. And well, they probably won't do very much damage. They'll probably struggle to hit. You can see most of the shots missing. They'll do some work. And they definitely are, as my opponent's army finally does shatter. 2 army losses. So, I've been having a lot of success with the build, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. It can counter Black Orcs, you can counter, obviously, a build like this. You can even do okay against a more goblin-y Vanguard or artillery-based build, because you do have those Ironbreakers, which are so hard to hit, or hard to break for Orcs. Orcs don't, except for artillery, Orcs don't have too many great tools, and Black Orcs, I guess. Orcs don't have much that can crack Ironbreakers, and it really showed in this game, where even with 2 Fate of Bunus, and that's 40 Winds of Magic, which, given that most Lords, if you don't have any other source of magic, most Winds of Magic you can get is 60, usually, is what is your Winds of Magic reserve for each quick match game. So my opponent wasted 2/3 of his quick match magic reserves on the Norgrim's Ironbreakers. And he still couldn't break them. They still got 114 kills. They still had most of their models at the end of the game. And they absolutely tore through those cheap, crappy chaff units that he brought. And that was 1 unit of Norgrim's Ironbreakers, and I had 2 more. So even with Fate of Yunnan, they're not able to crack the line there. The Miners with Blasting Charges did pretty terrible, but, you know, they held. That was all they're there for. The Throwing Axes have very low kill count, but they killed the 2 Chariots, which is what really matters there. The Slayers did a great job killing the enemy's Unbreakable Goblins, so a bit of a fight of Unbreakable there. Here you can see it does show them as the AP Cloonies here. It doesn't do that in the game. I'm not entirely sure why. Some sort of glitch. But either way, nothing to worry about too much. Bugman's Rangers, once again, just holding their own, baiting my opponent into a fight, essentially, and then slaughtering a lot of his troops. They took on the Boar Chariots, they took on the AP Cloonies, they took on the Morgrim's Mangy Marauders, they took on Azag. They did some good work, and so definitely a very potent unit. I definitely like these guys quite a bit, and they're definitely pretty cool. The biggest problem with this build, and of course the Godlobber routing off enemy artillery, which is really what it's there for, but The biggest problem I've had with this build is that the missiles I bring here with the Bugman's Rangers, the problem is that the missiles on them are very, very slow. Both the Bugman's Rangers and the throwing axes. So I might try to get Thunders in there somehow. It's rather difficult to deal with chariots if you're not able to slow them. There's not too many snares in this build. So if you're not able to slow chariots, if you're not able to slow it, especially Flying Lord, you don't have too many options. So I'm not entirely sure what I'll do. I might look into ways. I might even look into dropping the Rangers with Great Weapons in favor of Thunderers, just to get some extra fast-firing AP in there. Because just the problem is that, of course, Azak could just float around, do whatever the heck he felt like, and be a nuisance. And I couldn't do too much to shut him down unless my opponent missed micro and stayed still. For my opponent's build, definitely a cool take on things. I think very focused and sort of hitting me from all sides, but it didn't work out because my opponent kind of fed in one at a time. Though obviously at certain points he did have me distracted. Oftentimes my Bugman's Rangers were tied down fighting Azag and the Mogreb's Managing Marauders, while the Squig Herd and the Squig would be rampaging through some of my miners, and then my Ironbreakers and miners on the other flank would be getting overwhelmed by trolls and by nasty skulkers. But my opponent kept those Savage Rooks in reserve for far too long. I think he was hoping that I'd pull the Ironbreakers offline, but because I'd seen the chariots there and I figured there was something hiding, I kept one unit of Ironbreakers in reserve throughout the whole game. And in the end, I think that was I was rewarded for that patience. I think it's one of those that band of Savage Rooks came YOLOing out of the woods. These guys were ready to take it, and I hadn't allowed these guys to be distracted. So I think that was good. But I definitely think had my opponent had been a little more coordinated, things could have definitely turned out a little differently. So nonetheless, great game to my opponent, Persian Prince. Great game. It was a lot of fun. It's always great to have this classic matchup. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it entertaining and fun to watch. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, any criticisms, any questions, as usual, guys, I'm always open for questions, for comments or for constructive criticism. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions. So share them. I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.